Okay, so we're starting our poetry unit today. I do want you guys to take really good notes. So I'm going to walk you through them. And again, I'll explain beyond what's on the screen, but you want to make sure you at the very least get what's on the screen. So here we go. The definition of poetry in general, and again, these are all things that are on tests, so I'm not just giving you anything just to give it to you. Definition would be that it's an imaginative awareness of experience expressed through meaning, sound, and rhythmic language, meaning that there's a theme to it. The sound is important. We'll analyze sound beyond the theme. And it's rhythmic, meaning that you have things like iambic pentameter, where you have stressed and unstressed syllables. And that wouldn't be something that we would look at in prose. Remember, prose is anything that's not poetry. Poetry is much different because it's technically music. How does poetry look different from prose? Poems are written in lines and stanzas. Stanzas are like a paragraph in a poem. There's a lot of space on the page. So even though there might not be as many words, there's just as much, if not more, meaning sometimes. And then again, there's an example of a poem there. Again, it sounds different too. Poems pay special attention to sound in their work. You don't pay, like when we read Mice and Men or when we read Monster, it wasn't poetic. It wasn't written with rhythm. But when you throw your iPod headphones on or listen to music in the car or at home, you're listening to the beat too. I can't tell you how many songs I like just for the beat, and I didn't know half the lyrics. So think about that. Why do we like sound so much? When there is some meaning to the lyrics, yet we're like kind of ignoring that for sound. So again, get this definition. Poets pay special attention to sound in their work. They repeat words. You'll hear that a lot in songs. They'll say the same thing over and over again, especially like Justin Bieber. I'd say I'm sorry over and over again. They rhyme. For some reason, I feel satisfied if I hear a song and the rhyme is good. If it's a bad rhyme, I get kind of annoyed. So ever go away, happy every day. Kind of a generic rhyme. They repeat vowel sounds. That's called assonance. Lonely old bones. And only talk about long and short vowels. They repeat consonant sounds. It's called consonants. Sparkling silver stars. That's actually alliteration because you're repeating that beginning S. And use words that sound like what they mean. Eggs crack, splat. And again, that's onomatopoeia. Poetry is sensory language. It appeals to one or more of the five senses. That's imagery, right? And language can make a reference to any of all our senses by deliberate use of appropriate sensory words. You're going to write a sensory poem, and you're going to write a narrative explication of a poem right away in a couple of days. So, again, looking at imagery is important. Here's your first literary term. And again, even if you have all these literary terms in your cache of knowledge, your background of knowledge, get them the way that I have them defined so you know them for your tests. So hyperbole is the deliberate exaggeration used for emphasis. You're purposely overstating things. You might have that one relative or friend that always says things in a story and you're like, that can't be true. But it makes a story more interesting. A lot of expressions like, I have tons of money. I was waiting for ages at the DMV. I have a flood of tears after taking my final. Or I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. Those would all be hyperbole. A simile is a comparison of two unlike things, two dissimilar things, using like or as. Remember, simile, similike, similes. So you're looking for two dissimilar things. Not Steve is like Mike. If you said he's as fast as a train, you're using like or as and comparing two very different things. Metaphor is a comparison not using like or as, but it uses is, was, and were. Is, was, and were. Is a, was a, were. Is a, was a, were. Remember that. The world is a stage. But what's the comparison? People are all putting on a fake persona all the time. He was a lion in battle. He doesn't mean like he was like a cat, like he scratched somebody. It means he was so angry he was like a lion attacking people. Or if you're drowning in debt, that means it doesn't mean you have so much change that you can't breathe. That means that you are, so in debt that it's like drowning in an ocean. Or to have a sea of troubles means to have so many troubles it's like, like you're drowning. So that's a metaphor. Personification thing, person fiction, fake person. Personifications giving non-human things human qualities. So the waffle jumped out of the toaster. Waffles can't really jump. Or popcorn leapt out of the bowl. The news took me by surprise. Whenever you see a verb there, like took, news can't really take anything. Time can't really creep up on you. The popcorn can't really leap. So whenever you see a verb next to a non-human thing, it's probably personification. You can't have something that's not human doing a human action. So in the DVD, which most people don't use anymore. But if you say the download went on sale on iTunes, it flew off the shelves. That doesn't mean it literally flew off the shelves. It's a figure of speech. Remember, figurative language is what we're working with here. Here's some examples of personification. I would say for each of the terms that I give you, get the examples down. So the desk side with relief at the removal of a heavy book. You can kind of picture that. We have so many cartoons where non-human things do human things that you kind of like, SpongeBob or whatever, kind of get that idea in your head. Like the egg stared back at me. I can picture that, like the eggs, like, oh, please don't eat me or whatever. But personification is that it's giving something that's not human a human quality. So get an example down of pretty much all the terms that I gave. That's why I put them in here. Um, and again, kind of look through for yourself and see what the personification is. Jot a couple more of these down. Again, test yourself real quick. Can snakes love food? Yes. So that's not personification. The bear read my mind. Can anything really read your mind? So is that personification? Be careful because these are the kind of things I'll give you on a test. Onomatopoeia, spelled like onomatopoeia, one of my favorite words in the English language. Buzz, hiss, tick tock, drip, pop. Any word that represents a sound would be onomatopoeia. Again, like back in old comic books and stuff like that, people would use these. Like bam, smash, biff. Like when you couldn't have a sound in the comic book, it would be used to give an example of a sound. So flick on the lights, clap, shout, screech, bump, clack, clack, swoosh. Like when you make a basket, like swoosh. Those sounds are onomatopoeia. And again, maybe get some examples down. Symbolism, very, very important. We're going to watch a movie called Big Fish in a little while, a couple weeks, where you have to focus on the symbolism. I mean, things in the story that represent an idea. It's not a thing that represents a thing. Remember that. Not a thing that represents a thing. It's a thing that represents an idea or something greater than itself. So water represents new life. When it rains, things need rain. So there's actually something behind that. If you get really red in the face, that shows you're angry. So the color red symbolizes anger. Or if you get a red light and you're stuck there for a long time and say, oh, I'm so angry until green comes and green makes you happy. Green represents happiness, money, green light, green grass growing, so the weather's nice. A lot of times you'll see things and just automatically have a relation to them because of what they look like. That's symbolism. A thing that represents something greater than itself. And here's the last thing I'm going to go over on this screencast. Point of view in a poem. A poet is the author of a poem. So if I say the term poet, that's who wrote it. The speaker is the narrator inside of the poem. So the first thing that we're going to write or create is a narrative go animate. So you have to analyze who's the speaker, and when you create your go animate, keep that in your mind as to like who's the one telling the story. And then to finish up, form in poetry comes with a bunch of different things, and we'll come back to this, but it's the appearance of words on a page. Get that definition, please. Form is the appearance of words on a page, what it looks like. So it's grouped into stanzas, which are like paragraphs. If you were writing in an essay, that would be your form. And lines are grouped together a certain way. But you get things like an acrostic poem where the letters all have to, the letters all start out a sentence. If you wrote my name, Tom, terrific, outrageous, magnificent. Or if you had a concrete poem, it would be a poem that looks like what it's about. So form is important. Or E. Cummings, who's a famous poet, would write purposely not capitalize things and kind of play around with the form of the poetry because that way, you would understand the meaning behind it a little bit deeper based on how he capitalized or didn't capitalize or separated things. And Shakespeare wrote in what's called iambic pentameter, and a lot of times he wrote in couplets at the end of his stanzas too. So that way, if you have a big, long, boring play, if you're like watching Julius Caesar for 5 hours and you need to go out, to do whatever for intermission, when you hear a couplet, meaning two lines rhyming in a row, and someone speaking that, you're like, oh, now it's time to go. So form is very important. So again, I'm going to stop here, and we'll pick up with part 2.